Justine Graham is a Franco-American visual artist and professor based in Santiago de Chile since 2005. Through strategies of play, choreographic interpretation of text, and editorial design, book design, her practice probes into the boundless functions of photographic representation as a tool for conceptual research to subvert some assumptions, break down hierarchies, and make complex social subjects visible.
Sorry, it looks very pixelated, or not? It's okay?
Yeah,
It looks like illustrations.
yeah.
They look like drawings.
Yes, it does. It's cool? Okay. I'm
Super
sorry
cool.
if the quality of the images is not perfect.
Okay, no, it's
Sometimes technology is,
okay.
is really
Okay.
annoying in a way.
New version.
So I'm particularly happy to be with you in conversation, as I also confess that I lived in Chile only for 2 years. You stayed there for many more years. And I was fascinated because as a foreigner arriving in that crazy place that we love so much, of course, yeah, it's especially being a white Western woman, it's a very intense experience that you beautifully condense in this book, Es lo que hay. This is what it is. Visual Diary of a Residence in Chile, 2005-2022. And it's a very complex and articulated and rich book in 17 chapters. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the origin and how you came across this other American woman that was there many years before you, that share your last name, and how you decided to create this book and its structure.
Thank you, Federica, for the invitation. I was given a book in a meeting in 2010 called Diary of a Residence in Chile, 1822, by a British woman who had come to Chile following her husband, a naval admiral from Britain, and they travel by boat to Chile. He dies in the boat ride, and she arrives to Valparaiso and buries him and stays a year and writes a diary of her experience in Chile. 6 months in Valparaiso, 6 months in Santiago. And it's quite a well-known historic book from that time period. And so I received this book and I noticed the date, first of all, 1822. And I also noticed her last name, which was Maria Graham. And in that moment, I thought, this is incredible. I at some point, I should do something with it. But that's in 12 more years, will be 200 years of her. I won't be in Chile. So, and then, of course, I was. And so during the pandemic, as for many people, I sat down and started revisiting my archives, and the book was there in the back of my mind. And I think I got to a point in the pandemic where I had been living more than 15 years, and I thought, I do have something more now. I feel ready to be able to say about Chile. So I decided that at this point it was 17 years. I would make 17 chapters, each chapter a different topic. And also each chapter a different visual language. This was my 7th book, I wanted to kind of go against all my other books where you choose one language and apply it through the whole book. And in this case, I decided I wanted to really find a bespoke language for each chapter. So in this case, immigration, I decided to work with a scanner. I invited immigrants to pose with a scanner to deform a part of the face. So a portion is focused, the rest is not focused. And the idea is that it's talking about the sense of displacement and distortion one feels as a foreigner as you navigate a foreign culture, and how others perceive you partially and not knowing the rest of you. So I sat down for a really long time to find the right marriage between the topic, what I wanted to try to extract, and what language I would choose. So it's a book about Chile, but it's also my perspective and witnessing of things over 17 years, but it's also about photography and how the multiplicity of languages that surround us in our day-to-day, from photocopies to Google Image to etc.
And also, I would say a book about how you visualize. I mean, you have a background probably in social science or something, because you're very obsessed with statistics and politics and social issues, and this idea of like picking a different language for each chapter and topic, which really relates with the idea of how to visualize numbers that otherwise are kind of, they don't tell anything to us.
Yes, I worked with statistics. I worked with text. How text here are images from my local market. The titles of the text are actually the chants of how the vendors attract the client. And so I wanted to talk about this chanting and this call that floats in the air, and how do you interpret that through this object that's floating. And yes, there's a classification system that I'm quite obsessed with, and that's my background in political science, that pops up, I think, in the humanities. So in this case, this chapter is about socialization. It's where women socialize in public space in Santiago. And the titles here are verbs, so to mother, to wait, to drink. These are teachers in a happy hour. I was interested in showing and just taking the time to explore different moments of socialization amongst women, and I insert myself into these scenes. So I'm trying to fit in, but I don't quite fit in as well. And that's my foreignness. But these are places and spaces where, yeah, I want to think about how and where. So it's about gender, it's about space, it's about class. So yes, each chapter I'm really trying to. Obviously, I put these big titles, but obviously it's just one little, grain of sand about women and socialization in this case.
And because when I arrived, I was also surprised. Everybody told me before I left, Chile is like the Switzerland of Latin America, and how during the Pinochet dictatorship, all these ministries of economics, they were sent to study with Milton Friedman, the father of capitalism, and so they were called the Chicago Boys, and so how capitalism has completely devoured the country. And when I arrived, I just could not believe where I was, because I was used to countries, South American countries, more like Argentina or Uruguay or Bolivia and Peru. And then when you arrive in Chile, it's just completely overwhelming. You really feel capitalism everywhere. And I wondered if you...
Well, this is the perfect chapter. These are images from Google Earth. The year I arrived, the year after, and I'm looking at all the new malls in Chile. In the capital city, 17 malls, and then one in each capital of the different regions of the country. So I wanted to show how in 17 years, this mecca to consumption has impacted the urban territory in a big way. I like the question because it makes me go back to one of the dialogues I'm having with Maria Graham, and there's passages of her journal that appears throughout the book. She was very analytical and critical of the Spanish colonial regime in the Americas. And I think that's what I'm trying to do a little bit, is say how much has changed in 200 years. And I would say that the invisible thread that is being woven throughout the book is consumption and this capitalist model that has been very in my face for the last 20 years. And so I'm talking about it in different ways and different moments throughout the book. Maybe this is the least one. These are portraits. This is the people chapter. On the left, people I know. On the right, people I don't know. I happen to take. So this is from my beginning years, and when I was still working with analog 6:6 slide film, so medium format.
And I was also particularly intrigued by the chapter on health. And also the other one where you physically do actions to the photographic object and then you rephotograph it. Don't worry if we won't see it as we speak. You have to use your imagination, and then you can buy the book after. But if you could tell us a bit more about that.
So the health chapter, there were two issues I wanted to talk about. One was obesity and overweight levels. So I went to find the statistics for 4 categories: women, men, children, girls, boys. And that was actually the hardest chapter, that until the very end, I didn't know how to, I didn't find the visual language to do it. But I basically wanted to translate the statistics of these numbers. And I ended up working in the central market and finding objects that I felt looked like the human body, plastic bags and grain sacks. So it's just a page where I go and photograph the number, and I show of 100 slots, 75% of women are overweight or obese, etc. So I translate literally. And then I do the same thing with levels of cesareans, of birthing based from cesarean levels. So in the public sector, in the private sector. And there also, how do I abstract this act of cutting the female body to birth? So I found in the same market these ropes and then these graffitis with just lines. So I'm just translating with a graphic interpretation quantities relating to health, to specific health issues. So that was one translation. And then the other chapter on history, that was maybe the most conceptual chapter of the book. I worked with the archives of the National History Museum that has the biggest archive of photography in Chile, over 600,000 images. And I worked with Richard Serra's verb list, a very famous verb list from the 1967. And I chose 20 verbs. And the title of each piece is the verb and then the title of the archived image. And I apply this verb to the photograph that's printed. And I wanted to work with the 3D-ness of the three-dimensionality of the photograph. So I apply the action of the verb to that photograph. Here's the statistics of obesity and overweight for the different categories, for example. So it's hard to understand necessarily when you don't see the images, but for this history chapter, you see these objects that are folded, that are creased, that are burned, that are receiving this action, and it was a metaphor to think about how we look at history, and how this photographic image and how we keep reinterpreting and rethinking and shifting and changing our perspective on history through this application of force and action onto the three-dimensionality of the object, whereas most of the book is treated as two-dimensional reading of photography.
Thank you so much. We have to say that the book is published by Ediciones Puro Chile. And you are going to you had a book signing yesterday, but I'm sure you can sign again. Yes. At the Puro Chile stand K11, and that you're also happy to, if anybody has any question,
yes,
you're here.
I'll be here.
Okay.
I'll be at the stand afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.